been able to join, and particularly for our Spanish-speaking colleagues from Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay, so as you all know, we start with a very quick introduction to the Unlearning Labs and to MCLD. We'll do a very quick recap of what we've heard so far, and then we will delve right into today's topic, because so far, when we are talking of community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning, we've talked about, well, how do you even decide when and why and what the evaluation should be about? The learning question: how do you develop a theory of change? How do you measure success? How do you collect data on that unit of measurement? And how do we analyze the data? And today we are going to talk about, okay, so now we've done all of that, we have data analysis, then what? And one of the key things we've talked about when we talk about community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning is that data is actionable. We don't just do this because a funder has asked us to do this and we need a report to continue our funding or to show, look, we did the work, right? That's not the idea. We are doing it because we want to make sure that we do better, and we are able to learn from and improve the work that we are doing. And that entails two very critical steps, which is what today's session is about. It entails making sure that the analysis results are shared back with the community, not just the people who were involved in the data collection, but with the broader community. And then it entails coming together so that we can all take a have a discussion on what steps or changes need to be made. So today we are going to really focus on sharing the data back with the community. If we go to the next slide, please. As always, if you are new to MCLD or to the Unlearning Labs, a very quick 1-minute intro would be that MCLD is a majority world-led network of networks with 2,000 plus local community-based organizations and their INGO allies who are part of this. And we are committed to ensuring that every person has a voice in decisions that affect their lives. That is the central tenet of what we believe in, and we do it through 3 pillars: policy, practice, and solidarity. Policy, where we do global advocacy to shift power, to decolonize, to change the power dynamics and transform our systems. We do it at the national level to promote devolution and decentralization and other issues that countries identify. Practice, which is where the Unlearning Labs falls under, is about how do we pool together the knowledge, the experience that we all have in the sector to create something which is bigger than the sum of all parts, right? Because there is so much of knowledge and experience. And when we bring it together, what we have is innovation. What we have is creative ways of doing things which can transform the system that we want to transform. But that requires us shedding some of the baggage from the past, shedding some of the colonial ways of thinking, being, and doing, which say that knowledge rests within certain groups of people, the technical experts in the minority world, or what is called the global north. We very firmly at MCLD believe that all of us, irrespective of which part of the world we sit in and have lived in and worked in, carry a whole wealth of knowledge and experience, as do the communities where we actually work, right? And the Unlearning Labs is a space for all of us to pool together that knowledge, that learning, that experience to create something new, and to do that without the power dynamics which define our sector. And this, as I said, often involves unlearning some of the things about who has knowledge, whose knowledge is valuable, what is scientific, what is rigorous, all questions that we as evaluators would ask. Is the data rigorous enough? Is there bias? Is it good quality? All of these metrics, however, have had very colonial underpinnings. And in this space of Unlearning Labs, we redefine these metrics. We unlearn a lot of what we know about these metrics to be able to create new things together. We've been doing this series for a few years now. The first series of Unlearning Labs was on strategic planning, and we did it on how do we do strategic planning from a community-led perspective? What does that look like? So we took common tools like SWOT and PESTEL, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, SWOT, and then PESTEL is the political, economic, technological, environmental, legal, I missed something in there, I'm sure, framework that we do for strategic planning. And we switched it to see what would those tools look like if we did it from a community-led perspective. And our colleagues from Malawi and Uganda had led that process. The current series that we are doing is on community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning. All the topics for the Unlearning Labs actually come from our members. So we had asked people, and CoLMEL was the first #1 ask of our members. And so here we are. Next slide, please. We've been doing this series actually since last year. And we've done a number of steps, but essentially, what is the difference between traditional MEL and community-led MEL, or CoLMEL as we call it? Well, for us, the fundamental thing is that CoLMEL is data of the people, by the people, and for the people, right? So it is not done to satisfy funder requirements. It can satisfy funder requirements and give them valuable information on the impact of the work that is being done, on improvements that need to happen. But at the end of the day, there are three underlying principles to CoLMEL. Ownership. We look at who owns the data. Who decides how it should be used and where, when it should be collected? Voice. Whose voices are actually heard and valued? Is it the community or is it external evaluators and technical experts only? And power. At the end of the day, it is all about the power dynamic. And CoLMEL is about power with communities and power to communities. And this actually enhances the power within communities. But traditional MEL has often been an exercise of power over communities, where INGOs or external teams of evaluators appointed by them, even for local organizations at times, right? These are people who come from the outside and they sit in judgment over how good or bad the project was without fully understanding the context, the cultural, the rich fabric of cultural relations, of interconnections that are part of these communities and have a very important lesson in terms of how the work is done. So CoLMEL, as we in the movement see it, is a collaboration between communities and implementing organizations based on the community first principle. Next slide, please. Last time, because we had done this after such a long gap, I had done a very extensive overview of what is community-led MEL, different parts of the cycle that we have covered till now. That recording is available in case you missed it. So today we are going to do a very quick overview and move directly to the topic at hand. So CoLMEL, as I mentioned before, is community-driven, it's participatory, and most important, it is action-oriented. Community members invest the time and energy in doing this because they want to understand what worked and what did not work and how can they improve that work. And that is why today's session becomes so important. Next slide, please, which is in French, the same slide that we had about the characteristics of CoLMEL. Next slide, please. So the case for CoLMEL, again, I think all of us here, and I see many familiar names who've been part of the CoLMEL series, we all know why we do it. First and foremost, it is the right thing to do, right? If the community decides what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, they are the ones who need to understand whether what they said is working or not so that they can make improvements. The ownership should be with the community, and so it is the right thing to do. But at the same time, it also increases the sense of ownership and accountability. You can go to somebody and say to them, look, you did so and so things, but this was all wrong. This is what our evaluation found. As opposed to them doing this themselves and saying, oh, we did these things and this is why it's not working. because these things or these assumptions were incorrect, and this is what we need to change. It's very different. So CoLMEL induces a sense of ownership, but also strengthens accountability. It increases the communities know the context, things that external evaluators will miss. And so it does make the evaluation more rigorous. It does actually improve the quality of evaluation, contrary to a lot of the popular debate on evaluation quality, which seems to suggest that it may not be of the same quality. Next slide, please. And again, I see colleagues here on the call who've been doing this for a long time. I see Ritu here. I know their group has been doing it for long. So as we are doing this, if you have examples, please share them in the chat. Again, from the sustainability perspective, people's agency perspective, quality of data, CoLMEL is critical. Next slide. But the important thing to remember is you can only do CoLMEL in programs that are community-led. Because if you have a top-down program and an external person has decided what is to be done and how, then really most times the community is like, yeah, do what you want to. Why will they invest time and energy in CoLMEL? So this is one of my final slides before we do a recap of last time and move over to today's session. So this is the CoLMEL cycle. For those of you who have been part of this series, this would be very familiar to you. This is the cycle that we have been following. So we took the regular evaluation cycle, and what we are doing is we are taking every part of it and seeing how would it look different if we were doing community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And the fundamental thing in all of this is that while traditional evaluation is extractive, we go to the community to get data for our purposes, for evaluations that we want to do, for learning questions that we have. And then we don't even acknowledge that. We don't even give them that data. It's very extractive. And CoLMEL is the opposite. It starts with the community deciding what data they want to collect and why. They are involved in every stage of this process. They own the data and they take actions on it, right? So we've already in the past done not just MEL 101 and CoLMEL 101, looking at some of these fundamental concepts. We had full sessions on them. All the recordings are available if you want to go back to them. But we also then went into each of these steps. So we did a session on how do you create the theory of change? How do you create learning questions with the community, right? Then we went into data collection of how do you collect data with the communities? How do you frame indicators, which can simply be seen as indicators of success with the community? Then in the last session, we actually went into data analysis, right? So how do you do data analysis with the communities? How do you make sense of what you're finding with the communities and not just use communities for validation of our findings? And today what we are going to do is actually the last two steps of it together, focusing more on 5, actually, I would say, than 4, which is once we have this data and analysis, how do we make sure that the broader community has this information? Because they need this information if they are to decide what course of action they need to take. And so today we have 2 wonderful colleagues from One Village Partners in Sierra Leone who are going to share with us how we can do that and take us through this. Before that, a quick recap of data analysis that we did last time. Next slide, please. This one. No, not this one, sorry. The next slide. So to understand data collection and analysis, one of the key things that we touched upon last time was methods. We know that we can have different types: quantitative data collection, qualitative, or mixed methods. Quantitative is anything which you can quantify. So it's much more to do with the numbers, right? You look at the how many or the how much questions. Qualitative is when you kind of think about, well, what are people experiencing? What are they feeling? Things which you can't necessarily put numbers to. And often what we use in evaluation is a mix of these two. Next slide, please. Next slide. We had discussed in earlier sessions some of these things. In the last session, we delved deeply into the idea of data analysis. So we said, well, now we've collected the data, what happens next? What are the steps of doing this analysis with the community in a manner that it is not overwhelming, and yet recognizing that they have the best expertise to bring out some of the cultural nuances that we would not be able to bring out? And so we said data analysis is 3 steps. We first break down, clean the data, and examine the data. Then we synthesize the learnings from the data, and then we interpret the significance of those learnings. Next slide. We also talked about the different methods of data analysis and the key questions in it, which is really something that whether or not we call ourselves MEL people or whether or not we believe we do MEL are actually very logical questions that all of us address. We look at what does this data tell us? What surprises us most about this data? What are some of the trends that we are seeing, right? And what might explain some of these trends? And does this open up any new questions? The important thing in data analysis is that we are not making projections. We are not thinking, oh, this may be happening because of this. You are only looking at what the data is telling you and saying, is the data telling us why this is happening? If not, it is something on which we need more data. So that's the only important thing to remember in data analysis. Next slide. Last session, this talks about the various steps in the analysis process. I'm not going to go over this. If you were there for us in the last session, you would remember that we actually flipped the entire session. We were going to do a case study and an example of data analysis with the community, but many people on the call had important questions around things like rigor and trust and interpretation and bias. And so we spent our time doing that rather than delving into each of these steps. So at the end of this call, I will ask you if you feel the need to go back to data analysis because we did not cover these steps, we can schedule a separate call on it. But otherwise, this call today rounds up our CoLMEL series in terms of the various steps of community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning. We will in January next year have a session bringing this all together. Now that we have seen how do we make every step of the process community-led, how do we bring it all together, and how do we actually design a CoLMEL evaluation? And what are some of the sticky questions? So January and February, we will spend one lab each on that before we wind up this series. For those of you who are interested, we have a CoLMEL working group that is going to be working specifically on documenting all the rich learnings and conversations from this CoLMEL series to create a toolkit for community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning that all of us can use. If that is something that you are interested in, please let us know. You can write to my colleagues, Luana and Jean. I am going to put their email IDs in chat for you. Okay, with that, let us go to our speakers and colleagues for today, not speakers, conversation starters and people who are going to facilitate us for today. So we have with us Mohammed Rogers, who's the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Manager at One Village Partners. And we have Chad McCordick, who is the Country Director of One Village Partners in Sierra Leone. So welcome, Mohammed and Chad. Thank you for taking us on this very important journey on what do we do with all this data and analysis that we have done and collected? And how do we take it back to the people to whom it belongs, the community? Over to you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Sarah, could we get the first slide up? So as you heard today, we're going to be talking about sharing data with community members and program participants and how to follow up with ongoing action. Now we've gone through a lot of the CoLMEL cycle and talked about how all of these things interact. Now we're going to talk about what do we do and how do we turn it into action. So we are an organization that only works in rural communities in the far east of Sierra Leone, an area where men and women and children live and work in very, very isolated areas. These are areas where there are very low levels of illiteracy and numeracy. And though many of these community members have experience with development projects, have understood development projects as they've existed in their community, a lot, like we talked about before, there is often this presupposition that people have an ability to understand numbers. So what we're going to be talking about today is not just how we share our data back with communities, how we do CoLMEL, but we're really going to be talking about some specific strategies of sharing with folks who may not already understand a lot of the development jargon and numbers. And in particular, what really holds our and works as a foundation for all of our work in the community, not just our MEL, but also our programs, is ensuring that community members have a voice and the platform for them to involve themselves in our programs is
हेलो पापा
one that enhances people's dignity.
हाँ मैं ठीक हूँ 1 मिनट बात
Oh, I hope
Sorry,
everyone can hear me.
sorry about that, Chad. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So again, this is our approach, but I know all of you have your own approaches in your own experiences, and we're hopefully going to have time for everyone to be sharing some of that and working together more creatively. Can we move to the next slide, please? And we'll let Mohammed do a little bit of an introduction for us. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Yes. So for us at One Village Partners, our mission is to enhance collective well-being by investing in people and communities through partnership. We are community-led. We are disciplined. We are very much focused on sustainability, and we're very much focused on equitability and partnership. Our vision, we envision a future wherein Sierra Leoneans amplify their collective power to lead transformation and change in their communities. We move to the next slide, please. Let's say. So, what we do, we emphasize an approach that builds social capital alongside the programs to sustain the impact of our programs.
Just quickly, we're going through our values here in this slide. I think you jumped ahead.
I jump ahead. So, as I said, we are going through we are community-led. We believe our communities, partners are best suitable to define what it means to thrive. As we are community-led, we actually work directly with communities. We allow community to actually be part of the process, because once they actually know what they want, this can actually help them to actually reach their goal. We are disciplined in our activities, and we are very much focused on sustainability. We pay attention to a long-lasting solution that enhance collective well-being for our Sierra Leonean partners. Equitable. We also see the full participation of all people in our communities and programs. We pay attention in our community selection, our partner selection, and everything to ensure that everyone is important. Partnership, we foster partnership built on mutual trust within Sierra Leone and across the world. Go to the next slide, please. So what we do at One Village Partners, we emphasize an approach that builds social capital alongside the programs to sustain the impact of our programs. Inclusion in decision-making is very key in our programs, and a key part of decision-making is being properly informed. This includes the data that OVP collects. So I can move to the next slide where I can have Chad to step in.
Great. So how do we do CoLMEL? I think first of all, being community-led means it's important to start off with identifying a common goal that is agreed by the participants and yourselves as an organization. From there, it's important, once that goal is identified, it's important to identify the actions. And again, this should be coming from the community members themselves and the program participants. And then it's important to also identify the measurements. Oftentimes, we think that the more theoretical aspects of community-led development should still be done by the NGO or the implementing partner, and that's not the case. Keeping community members involved on all aspects is very critical, even in identifying the measurements. So, from this point, we do a participatory M&E training with our volunteers before the implementation of the intervention. And through this, we're creating easy to understand surveys and that are often based around pictures that are placed to trigger the change agent from the community to ask a simple survey question, right? So we practice these very often, but as I said, we're working in areas where there is very low levels of literacy and numeracy. So we're not going to print out a script for them to follow. In the training, we practice what you would be asking in the surveys and how you would mark down the responses. Once we do complete and collect all of the data, we do some of our analysis together, but then we invite the program participants to also make comments on the analysis. What context are we perhaps missing? Maybe there was challenges with the way the survey was laid out that wasn't quite very well understood. So that's a key way that we do our household surveys. We also do a lot of qualitative work as well. We do a lot of focus group discussions. We do a lot of evaluations like the most significant change evaluation. And in this, we're practicing a kind of outcome harvesting. So we ask about all changes in the community and not just focusing on the changes that are experienced because of the One Village Partners intervention. So, you know, alongside of this, we're also using, as I've shown you here before, a lot of pictures, inclusive materials. We also use little interactive tools that people can feel like they're actually participating in. It's not just like a very abstract activity for them. And of course, as we go through the analysis of the quantitative and the qualitative, we're asking for the participant feedback. We're making sure that we center the community member's voice at all time. And then we come to sharing feedback and taking action with all community members. So from here, we are going to move to the next slide, and we're going to be doing a mural. And I would like to know from each of you why you think sharing data with community members is important. Once we've gone through the analysis and we have some of that data, what is it about sharing data with community members that is important and critical to all of our CoLMEL discussions? So I think Sarah is going to put up a mural and a link to the mural here right now. Okay, if we can all click on that link and move to the mural, and once again, please give us your thoughts. If it loads. Mine is loading very slowly. Mohammed, is yours loading okay?
It's loading very slowly too.
Okay, we're coming to it. Great. So I think you can see all of those different boxes. Please add an idea of why you think sharing data with community members is important. Mine is still loading, but of course I'm in Sierra Leone, which has very slow internet. Okay, we have one response already: to validate if the data reflects the situation. Yeah, that's excellent. Like, I think even when you're working with a small group of participants, you may not have the right kind of context that broader people might have. I mean, if you're having any trouble with the mural, please put some comments into the chat. We have another response: it helps them make informed decisions for themselves. That's a very good point, and I think that's going to be a critical point that you're going to see in how we share data too. It's not so much that you want to dump the data onto people. You really want this to be a dialogue. You want to create the platform for people to have a dialogue of the results. It helps in forming long-lasting collaboration. Perfect. Yes. Very good. A respectful dialogue can beget more respectful dialogue, and so on and so forth. It helps to enhance ownership for the data. That's great. And which in turns reinforces the ownership of the actual program that is being measured. And we've seen examples of this helping out long term. It's a learning process. It's becoming active, no longer passive. Exactly. We need this. We need people involved in the dialogue as quickly as possible. All right. Okay, we'll give it a couple more minutes.
Unfortunately, my mural is still loading, but I can see from the presentation.
My mural is still loading as well. I think we are just unfortunately stuck here. Sarah, if we're missing something, just let us know. I think we have a few people still typing.
I think there are in chat also. Nahid said it helps in forming long-standing collaboration chat.
Okay, that's excellent. It helps the program implementers tailor their program to address community expectations. That's great. Yes. It helps to improve transparency and accountability. That's great.
It talks about community process.
We'll wrap up in about a minute here. It will help the people to know you care about what's happening to them. That's excellent. And it helps, it's a learning process.
Helps them make informed decisions for themselves. Yes, that's great. Learning process.
Okay.
Always on good responses, which is good.
Thanks everyone for contributing.
Yeah.
There's one more coming in. It serves as data accountability. Yes, it's a very good way to verify data, because if you have data that's saying one thing and the community is saying another, you have a challenge. Someone in the chat just wrote, information sharing helps build capacity of grassroots community organizations. Without info, they will remain unexposed. Very good. Like we need people to be on board and see this as a learning journey, just as those of us in community-led development are also doing so. Great. I don't think there's too many more. That's a great little discussion. Let's move on to let's
Why
move
do we
on to the
share?
next slide, please,
Next
Sarah.
slide.
Okay, Mohammed, this is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, so why do we share feedback data to community? As you can see already from the pictures, from the image you are seeing here, these are one of our colleague that is sharing data with communities. So there are many good reasons for sharing feedback with communities. Some of the reasons we found for us here, we say one major key one is what? It fosters accountability. Sharing feedback data ensures that those responsible for implementing changes are held accountable for their actions or inactions, leading to more effective governance. Accountability also encourages community engagement. When community members see that their feedback is valued and acted upon, they are more likely to participate in future decisions and initiatives. With this, it actually builds social capital, which is so crucial to the accountability of any community development project. The transparency is between the implementing agency and the community, but often we have seen it promote a level transparency within communities too, like I can say so. And so, one of the other reasons why we do share data back to communities to drive continuous programmatic improvement. Regularly sharing feedback allows for ongoing adjustments and refinements of your intervention, leading to continuous improvement in services, programs, or community initiatives. The strength of community-led programs is that the programs can continue to be shaped by the community even after the activities are completed. And another key reason for sharing data is why it also strengthens community bonds. By involving everyone in the feedback loop, a sense of collective ownership and responsibility is fostered, which strengthens the ties within the community. Sometimes collective action can provoke more collective action. Next slide, please. And I think...
Great. So we're going to start to talk about a few more direct and specific examples. We're going to talk about some specific approaches now as well. So I want you to look at this picture. This is one of our M&E staff presenting to data to a community about a water well project. And I'm seeing in the chat, there's a question for OVP. What is the community in your context? Yeah, as I said at the beginning, we're working in rural communities only, and we're working in very isolated rural communities that often have very low levels of numeracy or literacy. So it's part of our presentation today is about how we make some of these more complex ideas a lot more grounded.
Chad, so you would correct me if I'm wrong, but so in your case, you are still defining community as a place-based thing, right? So a village or a place-based
Yes.
definition of community.
Yes, we're
Which
working,
we work together beyond.
and because we're working in rural communities, we're trying to involve the entire rural community as much as we can.
So actually, what we do here, we actually try to pay more attention in calling our community. Instead of us calling them villages, we prefer calling them communities. And
Yes.
we most time try to reach to these places that are very much difficult to reach. And when the total number of literate people is very small. So, but we actually choose to call them communities instead of villages.
Yes. We're also trying to work in areas where, I mean, there are a lot of international NGOs that work here in Sierra Leone, and we're doing our best to reach those areas that are underserved. So yeah, please feel free to continue to ask any questions. So I just want you to look at this picture of one of our staff sharing data with community members in a general community meeting in a sort of village town hall. So I'm wondering if there's anything that you notice about this picture that can give you an understanding of how we share data. What do you notice about this picture? So you can raise your hands or just put something into the chat if you'd like. What is it you notice about this picture? Yes, this is, the person has picture that is being shown directly to everyone. So, and I think it's important to also notice the way he is presenting it. He is not presenting one picture expecting people to notice it. He's taken his time to go around individually to not just show the picture, but explain what it means. And so he's directly engaging the community. And yes, Jean just said everyone looks attentive. We're lucky. And I think there are, yes, the kids are looking at the picture. And I think that's part of it too. These shouldn't be very boring exercises. This should be fun. And many of our interventions are in the area of WASH and around germ theory. So as you're gonna see, we're trying to keep it a little bit playful when we talk about some topics that aren't easily discussed in public, like diarrhea, for example, right? A very serious situation, particularly for children. How do we discuss germ theory? How do we discuss reductions in diseases and still make it playful? Okay, let's move on to the next slide really quickly. So as you've seen, that is one area where we would be working directly with sharing our results by demonstrating the particular indicator inside that picture itself, right? So people have a particular understanding of what we're doing. So Mohammed, I'll let you speak very briefly about some other ways that we share results inclusively.
Yes, so as you initially just saw the previous slides, we pay more attention to when sharing data to community. We pay more attention to picture-based, as we already said. We have more illiterate people compared to those that are literate. So on the slides here, as you can see, we have two images by the right and one by the left. We actually make sure that everyone understands. So for us to make sure that everyone understands what we are doing or the result we are sharing, we ensure that we make the data feedback sharing participatory and very interactive. We try to keep it lively. We have a lot of energizers and try to get people onto their feet. we present data in a very simple way. Yeah. On the right, you can see the results and the picture of the particular indicators. These indicators are already being, we set these indicators together with the community members. So these pictures are presented to the community members present during the feedback sharing process. Aside from using the picture, we can also demonstrate the ideas of percentages to an audience by collecting groups of people together to demonstrate percentage of respondents. As you can see, we have people standing by the left, the left image here. This is how sometimes again we present percentages. So, but we can dive more into this on the previous slide, on the next slide coming. So.
Okay, so here is an example of how we would present an indicator. So the indicator here is around percentage of households that can present keys to a latrine. And so the idea being that if children can present on command where the latrine keys are, they're likely to be regularly using the latrine. If they cannot present it, maybe they're not regularly using the latrine, and this is one of the community's explicit goals with this project, right? So, in a dialogue with an OVP facilitator, the gathered community members agree on the picture, they know what that picture represents, and they know the nature of the indicator and the assumptions behind it. And of course, we're again tying that back into the overall goal of the interventions. And in this case, the community was very clear. The overall goal is that they want to make sure that their children are healthy because they're using the latrine. So, we conducted this survey with a random sampling of households in 3 areas of the community. And we monitored at 6-month intervals after implementation. Remember, we relied on the community members themselves, the project participants that we had trained, to do the survey directly in their own community, right? And we thought this was a very good way of removing any kind of bias, and this is a very good way of us getting a much more authentic result. So in this case, we could see that fewer kids over time were presenting the keys. So in this case, we would be demonstrating this drop over time in a number of different ways. Either through a very accessible way using PRA style use of local materials like seeds or stones. We could kind of count them out in each pile as in front of each indicator results, or through actually asking community members to stand or sit. And I'll explain a little bit what we mean, a very good interactive way. However, once the community understands this is happening, we ask them why. And if no one knows, we push them to guess. And this is how we start that collective dialogue. It's really not our job to make sure they're answering the right questions. It's really our job to encourage the dialogue and to make sure that the dialogue is grounded into the data also. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I'll let Mohammed speak on this very briefly.
So as we have been talking about ensuring that we share our data very interactive and participatory. For example, when sharing our data, for example, we can ask 10 people to stand in the center where we are facilitating the meeting. These 10 people, it's actually representing, let's assume, say, 100%. If we are demonstrating the previous indicator, which we are just talking of, presenting keys to children, we would first ask 8 people to identify themselves differently. like they can hold a leaf in the air or something. Emphasize that it is important that all 8 of these people must remain standing. Then we present the first result. We ask one person to sit down, which is 9/10, for example, was the result. It continues this way till the final round of survey, where one of those with the leaf needs to sit down, which actually shows 7/10 that are left standing. Everyone can see the target has not been met, but in a direct and simple way. So you can even disaggregate by section of the community. For example, in most of these communities that we go, the communities have been allocated by section. This is the way they understand themselves. So you can even disaggregate them by section. This way you can also involve more people to actually represent different areas. So this way the community members can see the results more directly. We have sometimes asked people from each section of the village or community to disaggregate themselves in this way. So like this is the way we have been sharing results in more, we share percentages using this section or using people to stand or sit.
And I think the important part that I just want to add on to this too is that we are not using percentages, we're not using fractions, we're using basic numbers, and we're emphasizing that this is a representation as we move forward. And we are going to talk a little bit about really how important it is to hyper-localize this. So if we're talking about a full community, ask for volunteers who are from those particular sections of the community where that information is being shared, because as you will soon see, it is a really good way of inspiring ongoing action. Could we move to the next slide, please? Great. So I talked a little bit about how do you talk about some taboo subjects in a way that remains engaging and keeps people feeling like this is a vital, important part of the work. So a really big part of doing, I would say, community-led development at all, CoLMEL, but in particularly doing data sharing in CoLMEL, is you really have to understand the cultural context of the people, how people would interpret this, how you are presenting yourself. For example, I am not out in the community sharing this. When we're sharing data back, we're ensuring that it's in the local language and not just the lingua franca, and that we're adjusted in such a way so that people, depending on the context, the cultural context of the community, you really do need to understand people, some of their background with these concepts, but also how to bring this about in a respectful way that keeps people involved. So the Bristol stool chart is a way of measuring diarrhea rates where people can identify their latest stool. And now it sounds gross, but it works. And they identify it by placing a small little pebble or identifying it on a tablet, as you can see here, of what they identify a picture of their latest stool. So we're very lucky here in Sierra Leone because speaking about these things are not as taboo here as they might be in other parts. So this tool helps us to understand the rates of diarrhea in the community post-WASH implementation. At a baseline, we'll interview a sample of households and particularly children and especially mothers, because no one is more invested in their child's poop or comes into contact with their child's poop as much as mothers. I'm sure mothers in this group can agree. So along that spectrum, the respondents identify their stool from solid to liquid, and the extreme at both ends are obviously unhealthy. Once we have collected the responses, we demonstrate what the rates of reported diarrhea were pre and post implementation. So here, for example, we ask participants to collect sticks or leaves to count out the changes over time. Same way, we're demonstrating over time how things have adapted before the project and after the project. So once we present these data sets alongside the survey results, this can really help us articulate the impact of the project and reinforce key components of a public health intervention. So this is, again, not an opportunity to just share data. This is an opportunity to provide a platform for a dignified dialogue where everyone is involved. This is an opportunity to reinforce any of the education on germ theory that might have come alongside your WASH project implementation. This is also a time to demonstrate that evidence of high use of a latrine, even though it's not meeting some of those targets, it's still higher use of a latrine will lead to lower rates of a disease. And that's a critical component in shaping future interventions. So I can pause right here to see if anyone has any questions. Thanks for the shout out on here. You can also use different analogies. Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, you don't necessarily need to be as explicit as we're doing, but it's important that people can kind of understand. Great. Any questions so far? Please just raise your hand in the chat, or we put it into the chat and we can go from there. Thank you, Rebecca, for saying that. I think the key that would be good to remember in this is a continual process. We're always learning, and in this next staff testimony that we're going to share with you, you'll start to see how this staff, sometimes the learning has to happen directly on the spot. So if we can move to our brief staff testimony, and then we'll give some time for people to view that. We have a short video to share with you all.
Experience during my first community feedback.
Oh, can we just start from the beginning, please?
Ibrahim Senesi, working for One Village Partners. I am going to share my experience during my first community feedback at our partner communities. Let me take a case study of Lalion Kovoma. After we share the result of the top 5 indicators, there was key 2 indicators that did not meet the target. One was open defecation, and the other one was effective hand washing after latrine use. After that, we asked the community members during general community meeting what caused or led to these particular indicators not to meet its target. Some community members were casting blame on the community volunteers group, the CAGs, and some were blaming the authorities not enforcing the community bylaws, and some also were blaming, casting blame on general community members. But on the whole, One Village Partners asked a question: why did this target not met? Series of responses came about. From that process, we also realized that community volunteers misunderstood the concept of what? Open defecation. And also the area of what? Effective hand washing station. Community members reported during the meeting that they were washing their hand doesn't mean they were using only the tippy taps, but they were using what? Kettle or other means after latrine use for them to improve or maintain their hygiene. So thereafter, we call the community members' attention together now. What is going to be your action plan for you to achieve this particular indicator in the next round? There comes in, they said, authorities will continue to reinforce the community bylaws for them to meet the sanitation target, and also for the CAGs to pay key attention to the refreshers training to understand the indicators while conducting these surveys. So with that, community members will able to meet their target in the next round. And OVP will continue to provide technical advice for the sustainability of those projects even after One Village Partners, because we will not be living with them forever. Thank you all.
Okay. That's a brief little testimony from the field. I was happy to see Rebecca clapping along. Thank you for that, Rebecca. So that's a good example of really just trying to facilitate the dialogue that is existing there, using a number of different tools to make sure that conversation happens, and then figuring out how to direct that conversation to a sustainable long-term action. So could we, let's move to the next slide. Oh, after that. So I just want to open this up. These are some of our tools that we've used in the past to demonstrate results with community members. And again, I think what would be critical is if we are, I'd like to hear from you. I know a lot of us work in various different sectors and different areas. What are some of the tools that all of you use to share data with community? So again, you can raise your hands in the chat, or you can put, or on your camera, or just put a question or tool in the chat. Okay, someone is mentioning using participatory rural appraisal. Very good, a powerful tool which gives room to different groups of the community to share their knowledge. That's great. Yes, a lot of our work is informed by PRA tools, and then really trying to build off of them in a way that really works better. And yes, sometimes we do sometimes we collect data from specific groups, women, youth, community authorities, and then what we like to do is also present that back to the full community, which really breaks down a lot of the barriers in terms of understanding the different groups within the community. Anything else, everyone? What other tools do you use to share data with community members or project participants? Someone from Spark Microgrants. Print out community performance scores and share with them during a community meeting to discuss the results. Where necessary, we discuss strategies for improvement. Yes, we here at One Village Partners have watched Spark's Microgrants methodology over the years and are really impressed. And the whole the scoring system is really, really interesting. It's almost like you are turning some of this data into a little bit of a game. It encourages involvement. It makes people invested in the project, and it can kind of break down some of those targets as well. Anything else before we move on? A beanbag toss. Okay. So I'm just going to read this for everyone. There was a beanbag toss. They must first answer a question about what data was just presented. If someone makes the throwing target, they move on to the next round. A version of this is good for kids. Again, like we're seeing lots of like really neat creative ideas to almost gamify this, to really make it exciting and involving, and it turns it into less of a theoretical exercise. Thank you, Annette.
Chad, there is a hand from Dr. Rebecca, I think.
I do see that. Yes, Dr.
And
Rebecca,
then,
go ahead.
then should we go into breakouts after that so that some of these great ideas we can actually document?
Let's do that. Let's hear from Dr. Rebecca, and then I'll go through our last slide and go through the group work.
Our data is usually very, very sensitive on sexual violence, rape, and most of our data, we have over 60,000 lists of people killed and thousands of stories. So We share through our articles, books, and now we are going to engrave the list of people killed from 1980 to 2000 and maybe to this year. We are going to engrave in a memorial garden.
Okay.
So, but we have over 2 million lists of data that, because anybody that we give him something, we collect data and we go to the community. They gave us the list of people killed, and so our data is somehow. Some of the data will come out from my book, We Bore the Blunt, and the stories of how they suffer and all this. And but I learned a lot from you, because we have the latrine and people misuse it, and all sorts of things. But I learn a lot from here. So thank you very much. I am going to improve myself and share with our volunteer the technical know-how, how to do it. So thank you very much.
Well, I think what's critical is that you know, there are times when data is really sensitive as you're bringing it up. And again, this is just our approach that we're using. So I'm going to move on to a next slide. Thank you for your responses, everybody. I'm going to talk briefly about how we turn knowledge into action. So, number one, see the big picture. When we're presenting back data to the community, it's not the only data that we have. We're trying to bring a more holistic understanding of why the data says what it does. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So we have several levels of our own demographic surveys around the project that we can rely on to see some of the context and to provide the context back to the community. It's very important too that this is a dialogue, as I said. We want to ask the right questions and then let the community members wrestle with it themselves. Remember, your job is really to ensure that the conversation goes on, but it's grounded in the data. You really kind of want to get out of the way. And by now the community should have seen some success, so they're going to have a lot of ideas about what this data means. But also, when they've seen the success, think about setting new targets. What does that mean for them? Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, new targets, new data sets, new activity plans. But before you get there, it's really important to try to draw a causal line. So we have a frank discussion about the successes. We have a frank discussion about the challenges. We need to set up our next activity, what we're going to do with this, but it's important to draw that causal line. This happened because of this. We built the latrines, we educated the families, now we have more children who are using the latrines. And I think it's also very good to build a collective consensus. We use a lot of voting. We use a lot of like visual reminders of what the majority supports. And the consensus needs to be on these activity plans too. So it needs to be a democratic process with the people who are there and involved, and not just with program participants and authorities. It really needs everyone involved. In Sierra Leone, it's important to have community leaders involved in all projects like this. But it's good to bring in a more democratic angle to this. Debrief with your program participants, debrief on your own, debrief among your team, look at all your data sets that you have beyond this particular project, and maybe there's things that you're missing that you're not seeing. Then finally, you need to follow up. Don't just leave this to be run on good vibes. Set a plan, set timelines, set benchmarks, check back in with communities that you're working with. Okay, great. We are going to move on to group work now. And if we could move to the next slide, please. So we have about 25 minutes of group work, and then we're going to take about 10 minutes to present the scenarios. So we're going to break everyone into 3 different groups. We're going to present a unique scenario and an indicator to each group and the data result, and we're going to ask you to go ahead and to develop a strategy to share the results with the community. And this can take any forms. You can present it as though you were presenting it to the community by presenting it to the group. You can also use your own pictures. Please use as much creativity as you would like, and we will have people in each of the small group, the breakout groups, to answer any question. Gunjan, is there any other?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things, Chad.
Yes.
So the Francophone speakers will stay here in the main room, and we will have translation for the Francophone speakers. Some of the English speakers will also be in the main room. So don't worry if you don't see a message coming up. We are going to have a few people staying here. And then as Chad said, the important thing is we are thinking about how are we presenting this to the community. So when you're coming back in 5 minutes, each of the groups is actually going to do it the way you would do it with the community. Now, we understand that there are restrictions on a virtual platform. For instance, play acting is much more difficult. A skit is much more difficult. But try to the extent possible that you can do it the way you would in the community, because that's what we are trying to document and share and learn together. We already saw some very innovative ideas coming. So please do that. And with that, I think Sarah is ready to send us to the breakout groups. So we
Great.
don't need any kind of reporting back. If you want to jot a few quick ideas about just how you wanted to share back, you're welcome to. But this is an actual exercise. We are putting everything that we have been sharing and learning into practice and doing it as we would in the community when you come back.
Great.
Sarah, are we ready? Okay.
Yep,
People should
I
see
just
a pop-up
opened the
message.
room.
Okay, you should all have a pop-up message. Please click on that. We will be back in.
And then Chad and Mohammed will float around and see how we're all doing.
Okay.
Okay.
Unless you want me to just assign you now. I think that's fine. I made you both co-hosts, so you should be able to
So we can join, we can
go wherever you want.
we go wherever we want. We join and unjoin easily enough. Together. All right.
So just to repeat that, Chad, because I know some people just came in. So if you are English speakers, please choose English channel, because we have some Francophone speakers who are going to be presenting.
Yeah.
Okay, are we doing with group 1, Chad?
Yeah, I think so. Sarah, are you ready?
Yes, actually, I'm not involved, but Natalie and Dr. Rebecca and Nahid and Fairman, we are ready.
Okay.
Great.
Okay,
Oui,
Nathalie.
alors merci à tout le monde. Après notre session de travail pour notre groupe, nous avons le scénario 1 et je crois que je ne vais plus lire la situation du scénario et chacun a vu. Alors, on va passer directement. Je joue le rôle de présentateur des résultats à la radio communautaire. Alors, je rentre dans mon rôle. Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue sur notre radio communautaire. Alors, aujourd'hui, nous avons de bonnes nouvelles à partager concernant l'évolution des mentalités dans notre communauté en matière de perception de différents rôles des hommes et des femmes, que les idées sur l'équité, sur les sexes, entre les sexes étaient améliorées. Alors, pour cela, nous avions comme indicateur le pourcentage d'hommes, des maris, des participantes qui pensent qu'un mari a raison de prendre seul les décisions relatives à la planification financière et aux dépenses. Et comme ligne de base, nous avions 25% et nous avons pu atteindre 10%. Alors, pour cela, nous avons récemment mené une discussion auprès des hommes de notre communauté pour connaître leur point de vue concernant la prise de décision au sein des ménages. Alors, pour vérifier tout de suite,
We are unable to hear Natalie. I think there might be a connectivity.
désolée, c'est ma connexion qui me fait défaut. Je suis revenue. Vous m'entendez maintenant? Alors, oui, je suis là. Alors, concernant les résultats, nous avons noté que sur 25%, sur les hommes auprès desquels, les hommes de la communauté auprès desquels nous avons eu les discussions, seulement 25%, sur les 25%, seulement 10% pensent que les femmes ne doivent pas prendre, ne doivent pas prendre des décisions concernant les finances dans le foyer. Alors, mesdames et messieurs, nous...
No, she's muted suddenly. Natalie, you need to unmute. You got muted.
Ma connexion encore, désolée. Alors,
Yes.
nous avons eu des discussions, nous avons pu présenter les éléments, les résultats auprès des autorités traditionnelles et aujourd'hui, nous voulons avoir une audience auprès de tous les membres de la communauté. Donc, notre chaîne est ouverte pour vos questions, pour plus de clarification. Merci beaucoup.
Yes, I want to ask, I'm surprised because my husband and my friend's husband, they were really so hard on us. They don't give us any chance, and all the money he will control, although I bring a lot of thousands of money, but I will never see it. Sometime he will use it on drinking and dashing it out to his relative. I have no mouth, but all of a sudden when you came, now he's very kind and treating me gently as a human being. What happened?
Je n'ai pas bien compris au début. La question, s'il vous plaît.
Well, we did hear, Natalie, the question. unless this is a part of your skit. Is this a part of the skit when she asked for the question again?
Okay, so I will ask the question again. So can I ask the question again? Naftali? So I'm saying my husband is very crude man, very harsh, although we have been married for now 30 years, but he has not been treating me well. He took me like a slave somewhere because he paid my bride price. And although I work hard, bring all the money, he will never allowed me to use any part of the money. So, but now I am seeing my husband change. He's loving me, taking me. He even asked the decision, what can we do with our money and our resources? Even his own, he will bring it. What bring all this change?
Alors, merci beaucoup, madame. Et il faut noter que c'est un progrès impressionnant venant de votre mari. Et ce progrès n'est pas venu du jour au lendemain. C'est le fruit des groupes de discussion que nous avions eus avec vos maris concernant la gestion financière dans le foyer. Alors, pour cela, il faut noter que cela montre que notre communauté avance dans la bonne direction en valorisant plus la collaboration et l'égalité dans les foyers. Donc, il faut savoir que c'est cela qui a suscité le changement de votre mari et on espère que ce changement va se perdurer. Ça ne sera pas un changement à court terme, mais un changement à long terme et que votre mari sera le canal par lequel les autres hommes aussi seront influencés. Merci beaucoup, madame.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Merci beaucoup.
That was okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Group One. That was amazing. And in just the amount of time to have that done with the community. That's wonderful. Group Two?
Yes, that's me. So we decided we need to illustrate the data creatively, as Group One has demonstrated so well. We're asking open-ended questions for the discussion. We had mentioned this before. The scenario is hand washing, and at the midline, it was improving somewhat, but at the end line, it had gone down. So the question is, why had it gone down? Reasons might be kids are distracted, they're running around, and it's important for parents to form lasting habits for their children as they grow. We had talked about songs to reinforce. I'm not going to sing it, unlike Group One's very good skit. And what else? We spent a lot of time on strategies, so we couldn't actually make the illustrations, but the illustrations, as I offered earlier, could be recounted and questions could be asked. And I think Dr. Rebecca's comment is right on, that we should expect personal sharing of that kind. Sorry if this is a bit here and there about it, but if anyone else from our group wants to chime in, please do so. Oh, I know, sorry. Another thing we said is that there would be, oh, can't remember if this is the main session or not. Leave behind, designate someone in the community to take over monitoring, hand washing, even after the assessment has finished. To make sure that those habits are still in play. Because as time goes on, they demonstrated getting the midline to the end line. If there's, you know, not a reminder integrating into the lives, that it's in danger of failing. That's all.
Oh,
Thank you, group 2. And we are going to, sorry, Chad, are you saying something or should we do group 3 now?
let's just go to group 3. I was about to ask a question, but I think we're running out of time. So let's go to group 3.
Yeah, so we're going to do group 3. Chad is posting the scenarios in the chat so you can, look at it there. But our scenario was very simple compared to the other 2 scenarios. Our scenario was that there is a financial literacy program in the community, and we wanted to find out if that financial literacy program was benefiting people outside direct participants. And in a focus group discussion, we found out that 3 out of the 4 people who were there did benefit and 1 did not. Now, we did not have time to write entire testimonies, so we did part of how we would share it, and then the other part I will explain. So we have a community meeting with 100 people, some of who can't see and some of who can't hear included in that, right? So, Yeshua, Jean, and Ekelo, Emma, are we ready? So we are going to go around in that group showing these smiley faces. So you see 3 smiley faces and 1 sad face. So we're going to walk around and each of us is going to read. So we're going to see 1 testimony. And it's not us, it's the community members who are doing it. So I would go around like this and say, actually, my neighbor, she came and she told me, and then the next person would, and then the next person would, and then the next person would. So that's how we would do it. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Full and effective. I really like that.
All right,
Very
Chad,
enjoyable.
any final words before we begin to close out?
I just want to say thank you to everyone for showing up and really engaging, particularly the group work. I was really excited to see the skits and the activity and the really deep kind of thought. This was a really great experience for myself. And Mohammed and I are very privileged to speak to all of you. Once again, I think the key takeaway with this would be always ensure that when you're presenting, it is a dialogue, that the voices of community members are really centered in everything you're doing, in your community-led development work, your measurement of your community-led development work, and how you manage the long-term impact of that work. So thank you everybody for showing up.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you, Mohammed, for, a very inspiring section and a very practical session. I think also the fact that we were able to do and very practically see how we would share back with the community was so important because we could think about things like, well, what if somebody can't hear and we are only doing jingles? Or what if somebody can't see and we are doing drawings? Or what if somebody can't read and we are giving people things to read? So we could think inclusively. So thank you for that exercise. I know that there were lots of ideas around jingles, around how we would actually do sports events in our group, for instance, alongside this to engage the people, right? So there's a lot out there, and thank you for getting us started on this. With this session, we have now completed the CoLMEL cycle, the 5 parts CoLMEL cycle that I showed at the beginning about what are the important stages of community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning. I know many of you have been regular participants in this, so thank you for being with us in this journey. As I mentioned, next year we'll have 2 closing sessions. In the first session, we will bring together highlights of everything we have done so that we can do a quick recap of what would this look like overall. And the one important thing I think in the entire process is something Chad just said, it's dialogue. When we are doing CoLMEL, the important thing at every step is that this is a dialogue happening between us and the community on whether it's framing a theory of change, on the learning questions, on the indicators, on analysis, or in sharing back with the community. So that is the principal thing that we have. After that, we do know that throughout this process, we have come up with certain sticky issues, issues of bias, issues of sampling, issues of, data analysis, especially if we have some quantitative data. So there are some sticky issues which have come on as power dynamics within a community. We know communities are not power neutral. So in the next 2 sessions, we will look at some of these sticky issues to try and unpack what can we do. And eventually the CoLMEL working group is going to create all of this, take all of this very rich information to develop and co-create the CoLMEL toolkit, which we invite anybody who is interested in to do. I had shared earlier some email IDs of my colleagues, Luana and Jean. Write to them if you are interested. The group will start in January. This is the last unlearning lab of this year. We will now be meeting in 2025, finishing CoLMEL and then moving on to the next session topic, which has been identified by people in our membership. So we want to take this opportunity to wish all of you a very, very wonderful close to the year and a very healthy, safe entry into the new year, peaceful entry into the new year. We hope you will join us for some of the other MCLD calls that will happen this year. We also wanted to end the year with some good news. Many of us have been involved in creating a book on community-led development, which is being published by Routledge. That book is out on 13th of December this year. It's called We Power Our Own Change, Community-Led Development in Practice. I know there is a chapter from One Village Partners. I know the Benin National Association has a chapter in it. I know we have a chapter from organization in India. So we have all of these little organization chapters which are part of it. We will share more information about it as it is released. But I just wanted to end with this good news, the year with the good news, that we have been able to distill the wisdom, the experience, the learnings on community-led development from a very wide array of organizations into this book, which is going to be released on December 13th. And I'm going to try and see if I can share my screen to show you that before we all say bye and wish each other a happy entry into the new year. So let me know if you can see my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the book. That's the book cover that you can see. And here is the table of contents where you will see Malawi. We have the history of community-led development. We have the different elements of CLD from collaboration to responsiveness to local context. Sierra Leone, Mexico, Uganda, Benin. This is global. These two are INGOs. Then we have India, Guatemala, South Africa, Haiti. Again, this is across multiple countries, and Sri Lanka. So many of our members and organizations are in this, and we are very excited to share this. And I'll stop now. If we want to all unmute and say bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. We can do that in our
Thank you,
local.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you,
Bye.
Gujam.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
And
Bye.
Mohammed and Dr. Paul, our interpreter. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Palmer.
Okay.
See you all soon.
I've been
Bye.
missing all this. Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you for
we're all
inviting
learning
me,
so
Sarah.
much. Oh, thank you for coming.
Yes.
See you next time.
Yes. Well done.
Thanks for doing the skit.
Thank you.
Bye.